So, Pokemon in 2024. So, I'm going to just reiterate what you just said because I'll be recording this at this point. But basically, what Sylph Spectre mentioned is that the Pokemon company themselves, one of the COOs, I think, came out and said that they have been releasing games at a very fast pace, right? Which has caused a dip in quality of Pokemon games. And that makes us wonder, well, what do we have then to look forward to or expect going into the future, right? So whether it be next year or 2025, so on and so forth for the next while. So one of the things I should emphasize from what he said is that even though he did say they are a bit worried with the pace at which they're going right now, like with how much they're outputting, and that they have considered maybe is there a way around possibly slowing down. He did still emphasize that it's a lot of moving wheels, right? There's a lot of moving wheels within Pokemon, and it's difficult to just be like, okay, hey, let's just stop for a while. Let's just not make anything for a while. Let's spend the next 3 years making one Pokemon game. That's easy to say, but remember, there's a lot of spinning wheels, right? We're spinning plates all at the same time. They have to be kept afloat. You can't, they can't stop releasing games because the merchandise people still need to get more merchandise out. The TCG still needs more sets to be released. Pokemon Go needs more Pokemon to be added, so they have a reason to keep people invested coming back, to catch the latest Pokemon, right? And the only way for them to properly introduce a large amount of new Pokemon has been through the games, right? To the release of brand new mainline games. So, where does this leave us? Well, one, I don't think they're going to slow down. If thinking anything, they're just going to keep the pace up, right? Keep going until they burn out, which even if that happens, they're a massive company. They'll just get new people. I don't think they're going to slow down whatsoever. But what I think will happen is that they will increase the size of the company, the amount of workers, and I would think they will offload certain projects to other studios. Because remember, up until BDSP, every single mainline Pokemon game was made by Game Freak themselves, right? With, of course, help from other companies, because you got to remember, a Pokemon game isn't made just by Game Freak. It's made by Creatures Inc. It's made by other little studios that contribute. But Game Freak is the main people that design the game, the logic behind it, what's going to be in there, brand new Pokemon, all that kind of stuff, right? But BDSP was made by Ilka. Now, they did kind of wing it with that one. I'm not going to lie. They did kind of wing it. I don't know how fast they made that thing, but damn, they really winged it with that one. But it doesn't really matter because the game still stalled well and did its thing. And I think it was just a bit of a test run to see how things would go. But here's the thing. I think going into the future, what we might see is that Game Freak might be going into this weird cycle similar to Call of Duty. And I think it's a weird comparison to make. And I think some of you might be confused by what I'm about to say. The way Call of Duty releases games, and this hasn't always worked for them. This has actually been kind of detrimental in some aspects. But the way that they've been doing it, the format, I think could work better for Pokemon. But the way they've done it is that there's 3 different studios that work on Call of Duty games, right? You've got Infinity Ward, Activision, and then you've got Sledgehammer, right? Those 3 studios make the Call of Duty games, right? And they make them, basically, each one of them have 3 years on them to release each, or to develop each game. So, while Activision 1 year is developing, their game, in that year, Sledgehammer releases theirs. But then the next year, Infinity War releases theirs, and then, by the time Activision has to release their game, it's been 3 years. They've had 3 years to develop and make that game, right? So I think we might be in for a similar thing to that instead, where certain projects, certain IDs, or certain things they have to make to fill the gaps. So think remake games, think games like Let's Go, like Legends, stuff like that. Those games will be slotted in between these years, so we don't have another 2015. FYI, if you guys don't remember, 2015 was a year where we got nothing, okay? No mainline games, nothing at all, right? That was the year after Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, and it was the most dead year to be a Pokemon fan. There was nothing to do, nothing to enjoy, no content. It was very dry. That's actually where I fell off. I didn't enjoy Pokemon anymore for that time. I just left Pokemon for a while because there was nothing, okay? Pokemon was just dead for a while. So I didn't enjoy it. I didn't play it. Treyarch. I say Activision, but it's Treyarch, sorry. But either way, doesn't really change the point. What I'm trying to say is, right, the only way this could work is if they offload those in-between projects so that they can focus on the big one. And the big one would be new generation. So think Scarlet Violet, Sword and Shield, Sun and Moon, X and Y, Black and White. Those are the big projects. Those are the big ones. To make it work, they would have to offload all the small stuff, the in-between stuff, the stuff that just the shit that's supposed to keep people busy until the next thing, right? Offload that to other studios and then focus 100% of your attention for the next 3 years on that game. Of course, would it be nice if they spent 6 or 7 years on a singular Pokemon game that's the most pinnacle of game creation and just amazing? Sure. But let's be real, that's never going to happen. The most realistic way this could work, is what I just suggested. You have multiple different studios. Doesn't have to be 3 studios, doesn't have to be 2, doesn't have to be 10, doesn't really matter. Just having other studios, right? Oh my god, my throat. I need some water. Just having different studios that will jump in and cover those gap years, right? Cover that time frame while Game Freak's working on the next project. That's where I think like the future of Pokemon should go. Or that's where I think it's gonna end up. Like, that's where I think we're gonna be going. Because Ilka already got to make a Pokemon game. They already got to make BDSP, dude. Like, they already did it. Like, we already have proof of this. They've already tried it. Now, unfortunately, Ilka did drop the ball a little bit with BDSP. It was a bit of a rushed and half-assed game. Still sold well. Still kept people invested. Gave people a reason to buy more merch, you know. It existed for a reason, did its job for a bit. But it was slotted in, like, with a very short, time difference between it and Legends Arceus releasing. So it was a bit of a weird mess. Because let's be real, dude, we basically got more or less 3 Pokemon games in 1 year. Like, if we're going to be real here, we pretty much got 3 Pokemon games in 1 year. Because there was basically 1 year's distance between BDSP and Scarlet and Violet. Literally a year's worth of time between those 3, like the 3 of those games releasing, which is ridiculous if you think about it. So they're not going to slow down. I don't think that's going to happen. If anything, like I said, I think they're going to just simply offload projects or things that need to be done, right? So they might internally have this like plan for like, okay, they might have a plan for like the next 10 years of Pokemon, right? They might have that already planned out. Like, okay, yeah, so, in 2025, we're doing a new generation. In 2026, we're going to have DLC for that generation. 2027, it's going to be blah, blah, blah. And then 2028, it's like, they might already have an internal plan for the next however much amount of time. But what I think is going to be happening is that all that in-between stuff is going to be filled in by other people. Like other studios, like not Game Freak themselves. But yeah, what do you think, Soph?
Yeah, I think that looks to be the direction that we're going in, especially because, as we said, throughout this entire stream, is that they want to keep up that new generation rate, and in order to do so, they're going to have to delegate some things to other development studios, because it's just not feasible. It's just not, and they've said that themselves. And I think the interesting thing is that dude did say. It seemed to be that he wants to keep up the release cadence, right? They said that they want to keep up the release cadence, but, make sure that they're maintaining quality, which sounds to me like we're still going to be getting, yearly Pokemon games.
Yeah.
But I think I have a suspicion that Nintendo I think this was confirmed a little bit somewhere where Nintendo kind of commented on they tweeted out about it, actually, like the performance issues in Scarlet and Violet. Okay. Nintendo had said something, so I think there's a little pressure from Nintendo to represent their consoles a little bit better, because if, let's say, Scarlet and Violet are to be the the staple games of the Switch, I mean, they're up there. They're, in terms of sales, they're right up there, right? Yeah. It is the biggest, media company under Nintendo, Pokemon, that is, right, or part of Pokemon. So if that's the staple game on the Switch right now, it's not looking too good for the platform.
No,
right? As a whole,
that is true.
For the publisher, Nintendo.
That is true.
So I think there will be some pressure moving, and I think that's what this Pokemon guy was talking about when he said, "Well, the cadence is gonna, we want to keep the cadence up, but also maintain quality." I think he was kind of, speaking to that thing that Nintendo has stated, but also the complaints from the fans about, performance in the game. So I think there's a little pressure to, keep up that cadence. but also improve the quality. And in order to do that, if they couldn't improve the quality and yet they already delegated BDSP to a different developer,
Yeah.
I think they're going to have to continue doing that, but then expand Game Freak, as you said. That's the vision that I see moving forward.
Oh yeah, for sure. But that's the thing, like, because they've always had this like internal thing of like, oh, but we're still a small studio and we try to keep like a small, development team to keep it more intimate and blah blah blah. But that's like, let's be real, that's not realistic.
That was that was Masuda's choice. He had openly said, "Oh, I like keeping Game Freak small." And people were like, "But dude, like, look at your games. Come on."
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing, right? Like, he's not around anymore, at least in terms of Game Freak. He's not the one making decisions at Game Freak anymore.
So that's why I think it'll expand. And they got that new office too, right?
Yep.
The new office.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
building.
Right. Because they're right next to Nintendo now, like Nintendo's actual like employees and stuff. So see, that's the thing, right? I think we're gonna keep seeing yearly releases. We're gonna keep seeing it. If anything, it might even get worse. Okay, it might even get more intense. But I think what will happen is that we will also see increases in the amount of people involved with this stuff, right? Like, I don't think, we're going to see a massive increase of how many people are involved, who is involved, what studios are involved with the development of these things. I think that's one of the things we're definitely going to see, is that you're going to start noticing that, oh, wait a minute, like, it's not Game Freak making this remake, or it's not Ilka making this Legends game or whatever, right? Like, not that they didn't make the Legends game, by the way, it was Game Freak, but either way, my point just is that we're going to start noticing different hands being involved, right? Different people being involved, because you can already notice that when one aspect, which is the spin-off games and the mobile games have always pretty much been developed by other people than Game Freak. Like, Game Freak never really did those, right? They never really bothered with like the those games whatsoever. They weren't involved with it, right? It wasn't really their responsibility. They had other studios handle that, right?
Yeah.
And it was like the pride and joy of Game Freak to be like, we're the ones who make the real Pokemon games, the mainline Pokemon games. And then all of a sudden BDSP happened.
At most they'd play like an advisory role to make sure that everything in that spin-off universe, coincided with the main Pokemon canon, but that was it. Not like an actual development role.
No, exactly. So that's the thing. Like, at the end of the day, the only way that this can realistically keep going and we can get better games, because they're not going to stop releasing and churning this shit out. You have to understand, guys. They're not going to. No. You have to think about this from a realistic standpoint. It's like trying to argue that, like, oh, hey, Coca-Cola should stop producing like Coca-Cola for a while because their cans are bad for the environment. They're not going to stop, okay? Just because they're bad for the environment doesn't really change the fact that people are still going to buy Coke, and people, Coca-Cola's still going to keep making them. Doesn't change anything, okay? Doesn't mean anything to them. It really doesn't matter. Same thing with Game Freak, and same thing with the Pokemon Company. Just because it's bad for the consumer, it's a bad game, doesn't change the fact that they still gotta keep making that money, gotta keep giving that moolah to their investors. That's just how life is. That's just how business works. They gotta keep making that cash, so they're not gonna stop, okay? They're gonna keep going. If anything, get worse with it. They might even do more than they've done before. But I do think it might get better for some of the mainline big releases, just by the fact that Game Freak will not be involved with everything, okay? Because who knows? Like, we're all like doom and gloom just because of like BDSP being shit. But let's be real, we could get an even better game than anything Game Freak could have given us from a different studio that's just very dedicated and passionate about it, right? Like, imagine if right now...
And, perhaps they weren't given the time that they needed, right? Like, even, like, you got to think about it this way, too. Even Game Freak, who is intimately familiar with Pokemon, they can't meet that release schedule.
Exactly.
Right? That they likely set for Ilka, who's coming into this, new. It's like...
fresh, new.
Yeah, you can't expect anything more, really.
Yep. But see, that's
the time, even by the whole Pokemon conglomerate timing of the generations and all that.
Yep. See, that's the thing. That leaves us now then with, okay, so if we're not, if they're gonna rush it, keep going, whatever, then what is it we're expecting for the next, like, next 2 years, right? Because let's be realistic. Let's look at the next 2 years. Let's not look beyond that, because once you get beyond that, it gets a bit difficult because you don't know exactly what might be happening 5 years from now. But let's look at like next year and the year after that. Like, what are we realistically expecting? Well, right now, within like rumors and leaks and stuff, there's only really two things that are like talked about. One of those things is a UNOVA game. Now, I'm gonna be real. there is a lot of hints to UNOVA in the DLC. I don't know if you've seen this, Sylph, but there's like references, like for example...
yeah, I've been seeing this. I've been seeing this.
So basically, all the characters in the second DLC, like all the Elite Four, like the special Elite Four, like trainers, like the 4 new ones, they're all related to characters from Pokemon, from UNOVA, basically, from Black and White, right? They're all related to characters from there. And then there's just a bunch of small references, like for example, Arcaludon, the brand new evolution of Duraludon. That one, for example,
that's the Skyro Bridge.
Yes, exactly. They're like the bridge. So you've got that. You've got like well, I mean, Diplin. It's like a candy apple, kind of a reference to like candy apples, which are from the US, etc. You got some weird little like hints like that. And then of course you have Riddler Koo, the leaker. If you guys do not know him, he's a legitimate leaker. And he's been kind of doing these weird hints like, oh, your Legends UNOVA, He's done a bunch of stuff like that, which makes a lot of people wonder, like, oh my god, are we going to get a Legends UNOVA game? We're going to get a remake? Are we going to get Black and White 3? But I don't know, because the one topic that you and me have spoken about before, Sylph, is a Johto game, right?
Oh no, no, not this one.
Because the thing is, Johto just seems like the most logical next thing right now. Now, the reason I say that is because, one, nostalgia. 2, it's gonna be next year, I think, the anniversary of Gold and Silver. Let me check. Gold, Silver, Pokemon release date. I think it's gonna be the anniversary. So it's they were released in 1999. So it's gonna be it's the 25th anniversary. Yeah, I thought so.
Ooh.
See, it's the 25th anniversary.
That timing kind of works out, actually.
Yep. Like, think about that. It's the 25th anniversary of Gold and Silver next year, which makes total sense to be doing a Gold and Silver themed game to kind of give people a reason to get, like to enjoy like those games. Because you got to think about it. When was the last time Gold and Silver were actually available, not counting Virtual Console? Like, when was the last time you played a Gold Silver game? It was Heart Gold and Soul Silver, right? That was the last time. Versus Gen 1, which you already got to see again on the Switch with Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, right? That was remade again. And to me, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee represented this kind of new thing where they were willing to try new concepts, right? Like, and Legends Arceus kind of was another one of those. They were willing to kind of experiment and make new things. So whatever, like, I'm not going to say it's going to be a Let's Go Johto. I'm not going to say it's going to be a Legends Johto. I'm not going to say it's anything like that. Rather, I would say it's just going to be a Johto game. That's at least what I'm speculating that we're going to get. I don't think we're going to get UNOVA yet. As much as I think it would be awesome, and I think everybody would be excited for a UNOVA game. I think everybody would be hyped for that. And it would be like the biggest hype in the world if that's what's announced on Pokemon Day next year in 2024. That would be fantastic. But I just feel like Gold and Silver make more sense. There is references to Gold and Silver in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. There is references in it of it into DLC 2. There's tons of stuff that's hinting towards it. And next year is the 25th anniversary, okay, of the original Gold and Silver. It just makes sense. It just makes total sense. And also, it makes sense as that being like the next remake, right? Because think about it. Red and Blue already got it, right? You had Red, Blue, Green, Yellow, right? And then you had Fire, Red, Leaf, Green. And then you have Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee. So Gold and Silver, you had Gold, Silver, you had Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and now you can have whatever. Let's Go Johto, Legends Johto, whatever you want to call it, can be the next one. Diamond Pearl, you had Diamond Pearl, and then you had, Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. So, like, my point being that, like, even down the line a few years from now, I'm expecting us to get another remake of Ruby and Sapphire. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, you gotta remember, we are right now in 2023. When did Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire come out?
2014, was it?
Next year it's gonna be a decade, dude. It's gonna be a decade. Think about that. It's gonna be 10 years since ORAS came out. Now, it doesn't feel like that long ago. It doesn't feel like that when you take a step back.
No.
But seriously think about like this. It has been a decade since ORAS. So by the time we reach the time where they got to fill in the gap with another game, the time where like like for example, we're expecting Gold and Silver next year. think about like when the next moment like that happens down the line. So, with Generation 10, Generation 11, whatever, it will be time to slot in a new game there, and that will be an ORAS remake, or a Ruby and Sapphire remake, or of some sort of game like that. You guys get kind of what I'm saying? Like, it's been a long time. Like, it's been a long time since we had those games released, and it doesn't feel like that long, but it's been a long time, okay? Which doesn't surprise me then that they would be willing to recreate those or bring it back in some way or shape. It just makes total sense. So I'm going to say, I don't think it's going to be UNOVA next year. I think Gold and Silver remakes, and I say Gold and Silver remakes of some sort. I don't know what kind. It could be a Legend Johto game. It could be something totally different we've never seen before. It could be anything. I don't know. But that's what I think is going to be next year. Could be, if it's a UNOVA game, perfect. I would love to be wrong here. Okay, I'd love to be wrong. I think UNOVA would be fun to revisit in a 3D environment and everything. I think that'll be really sick. But I think Johto is the most likely thing. That's the thing, though. What do you think, Sylph?
Oh, well, yeah. I'm looking at, like, just in my head, I'm thinking about the rate at which they release remakes. Yeah. And it seems to be somewhere between every 5 to, what would it be, 8 years?
Well, are we counting like between when the original came out to where the remake came out? Or
no, I mean counting? Like between remakes themselves. Okay. So like Fire Red, Leaf Green. Okay,
let's start from, I guess, from
5 or 6 years.
Let's start from Generation 6 and go forward, because I think it's easier then to kind of like count. So Generation 6 X and Y, that would be 2014, right? Or 2013, sorry, 2013.
Yeah.
Then in 2014, you had Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. Then in 2015, there was nothing. 2016 was Sun and Moon. 2018 was a third version game. And then you had 2017. No, sorry, 2017 was Ultra Sun and Moon. And 2018 was Let's Go Peach and Eevee. So that was another remake, but it wasn't a regular type of remake, right? It was like, kind of a
it's a weird Pokemon Go
thing.
Insert thing.
And then you had Sword and Shield, right?
Shield.
2020 Sword and Shield DLC, and then 2021 was BDSP. So so
it's 5 to 7 years.
Yes.
On average, because Fire Red, Leaf Green to Heart Gold, Soul Silver, Heart Gold, Soul Silver to it's about 5 to 7 years per remake. So let's say 2021. So we're looking at 2026, 2027, 2028, possibly for Black. So I don't think it's time for UNOVA.
No, that's the thing. I don't think it's realistic to expect UNOVA remakes. Maybe, but that's the thing. The way that like the Riddler has been hinting at stuff, it doesn't seem like he's really hinting at a remake game at all, to be honest. But like something totally different. Because that's one thing we have to remember. We're looking at all of this from the perspective of the last 20, 26, 27 years of Pokemon, right? We're looking at it from through the lens of what we know, right? It's like that whole there's the whole I don't know, it's like a philosophy, a theory, or whatever, that like the way we view things is like imagine if you're a guy who lives in a 2D space, right? And all you know is that 2D space, but you're being watched by someone on the other side, but he sees like what you live in the 2D space. You can't go out of that, right? You can't go out of bounds of that because you're limited within that space. So when somebody looks, but from the outside, the person who's like observing you, they move in a 3D world. So like you only know what you know, right? You don't know like that there is a 3D world around you. And that's kind of the same way I view this. Like we view this from this perspective, this one lens that we know of it, right? We know regular Pokemon games, we know remakes, we know Legends games and Let's Go games. That's what we know because that's what we've observed over the last however many years of releases, right? But who knows what kind of stuff they could concoct and make that we can't even comprehend the ID because we don't know the ID just yet. Like who would have thought about Legends Johto Legends Arceus, right? Before its release. None of us would have thought that kind of game would exist, okay? None of us would have imagined it. Sure, somebody may have had like a fun little fan game idea of a game where you go back in time in Pokemon. Sure, but did that really exist as a conscious idea in our minds? No. None of us thought that would be a thing. None of us even imagined that. And then boom, it happened, right? Like, anything is possible. And that's the thing. We view it from this lens of what we know, and that's all we can do, because we don't know what they could concoct. They could make a game that's like set in the future, and now all of a sudden there's like, you know, space Pokemon. They could be like, oh, this game is all set on this one round little island and it's just inhabited by Slowpokes. I don't know. My point is, like...
So here's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Is that if you were to take like the main series new generation releases, right? We generally have we understand the timeline for those, and we also know that has to happen because merch, etc., and Game Freak has said, you know, we wish to keep making new Pokemon, blah blah blah. So new generations, we can say, are relatively safe territory. They come out every X number of years, blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
The only other thing they can do, really, and the only thing they've ever done, even if you factor in Let's Go, even if you factor in the remakes, even if you factor in Legends, right?
Yeah.
The only thing they can do, and the only thing that makes sense for them to do, is operate based on past work they've already done, because they know they can make that still sell, and it's also a hell of a lot less work, usually, right?
Yeah.
So then what you have to do is you have to say, okay, well, they want to release every year. It's not going to be a new generation every year. We know that much, right?
No, definitely not. No.
So all that's left is stuff that's based on past generation. And at that generations, and at that point you have, you know, a sort of hit or miss thing where you could say, okay, well, Sinnoh's definitely off the table. We just got 2 Sinnoh games, right? Yeah. What other gens make sense? Probably one that's not been too recent, right? So you can probably throw away Gen 9, obviously, Gen 8, Gen 7, probably.
Yeah.
Gen 6, maybe we'll leave in there. That's still so soon, right? They want to operate based on past things. Then you can look at which remakes were most recent, right? So you have Gen 3 as soon as 2014. Like, it kind of makes sense. And then we had Let's Go recently. It kind of makes sense that Johto would be next in some sort of rotation here.
Yeah, but that's the thing. We just don't know what format. We just do not know what kind of format that would be. Also, G Famous, welcome to stream, my guy. Glad to see you again. What's up, my dude? But no, you're right though. It's like it's a question of, it's not really a question of if, but more so like what it's going to be like, right? Like, it's not a question of if we'll get a game. We know we're going to get a Johto game, right, at some point, probably next year. Question is, what kind of game, right? Like, what format's this going to be in? What way is it going to be presented in? Because Legends Arceus, in some sense, was also a test game, I think, for them to make an open world environment to see how that would feel like. I think that's what it more or less was. But also, that's the thing. Where can they go now with Pokemon games? They've done the open world thing, right?
Yeah.
What did they do now? Just make another open world game? Or do they go backwards and be like, hey, you know, we did open world, but not anymore? You know, like, where do they go from here with, like, you know, with their games, with their, like, IDs and stuff? Like, what's the next step,
it's tricky,
right?
Because if you think about the two really, like, curveball games that they gave us, Let's Go and Legends, right?
Yeah.
They're complete opposites. One was like a faithful, so to speak, just like almost grid map game.
Yes.
The other was a completely busting open of the Sinnoh region, right? Well, Hisui, right? Into this open world thing. So it's like, what would the next one? What's the next curveball going to be? It's kind of hard to even imagine unless they were to pursue one of those. I think ultimately Let's Go sold better than Legends, right? And was probably much easier to make too, which is a factor. But also they made Let's Go in light of the popularity of Go, which isn't quite as much, you know, it's not definitely not as much now. So would they go there again? Or maybe, that makes me just think they want, you know, just go back to the Mega timeline and make kind of a faithful, not necessarily Go style, Gen 2 thing for the Switch. Like that's the thing. Kind of in my head right now.
Because that's the thing. I feel like the Let's Go stuff, and I'm not saying a Let's Go game as in like, oh, with the same mechanics and stuff, but like a styled game like that, like a game in that style, so to say. It's like what makes the most
ROI
sense.
is so much better than Legends, I would imagine.
Definitely, because it's easier to make. That's undeniable. Easier to make. Yeah. You don't, because like Hisui required and Legends Arceus required a whole new region, basically. Because yes, it is Sinnoh, but not really. You know, it is Sinnoh, but not really at the same time. You had to make a whole new environment, imagine all of that, and then also adjust it to fit with existing lore and stuff like that too, right? Like to make sure that it makes sense, you know, to some level. Versus here's gold and silver and Johto all over again. Like that's way simpler to explain and give compared to like, you know, oh boy, guys, have to make like a version of Johto that's totally new. Like it's way easier, so it makes the most sense. Also, Justin Jenkins, what's up, man? Welcome to the stream. But like, that's the thing. Like, it just makes the most sense. Like a simple remake of Gold and Silver. It's been 25 years next year. It's the most logical thing for 2024. Like it just makes the most amount of sense. And 2025 is next generation. Like that's just exactly, that's literally what it is. Okay. Like, let's put it like this.
I'm thinking shove some new forms in there. Like, take elements of Legends and Let's Go and kind of fuse them. And that's what I'm imagining, right? So break open the Mega timeline again, give the Johto starters Megas. Boom, that's 15 million sales just off of that. I mean, come on now.
Literally.
And then new forms, right?
Yep. Dude, I mean, they can pull shit out of their ass. They can literally invent a brand new form of Pokemon and be like, oh, this is a Johto form. These are Pokemon that specifically exist in this alternate timeline of like, this is not the Johto you remember. This is a Johto that's been altered, you know, like.
Wait a minute.
You know,
future. Ooh.
See, that's the thing. They could do a future version of Johto, right? Like a future Johto.
I'm in. Future Johto. That's it.
I would buy that, to be honest.
That's what's happening. 2024. Baby, let's go. Let's go.
Dude, it genuinely could work, though. That's the crazy part. They could genuinely do that. Like, you know, like.
Oh, my God. It kind of makes sense, bro.
It does, though. It does, though. Wendell Eugene, welcome to the stream, by the way.
Just keep in mind. Okay, so Let's Go. What was it? It was a intermediary period between Gen 1 and 2. It takes place. It's a different timeline, but in theory, it takes place about a year after the events of, let's say, Fire Red, Leaf Green, right?
Yes.
So Blue, after Red beat him, we know that Blue went off to the Sevi Islands to go train more, and then he comes back and he has like a Heracross and a Tyranitar and all this stuff, right?
Yep.
And then he comes back and becomes the gym leader. And in Let's Go, Blue had just become the gym leader. Red was just about to leave to his adventure on Mount Silver, right? All this stuff. So we know it's somewhere about a year out. So it's basically present. It was just another remake. It's the present time. Legends was the past of Sinnoh. Imagine we go to Johto and we go to the future. And they would kind of tie in with all this stuff that's going on in Scarlet Violet, to be honest, because we got this kind of futuristic theme with all these new paradox form kind of things, right?
Yep.
I don't know, man. That'd be sick.
Oh, dude, it definitely could work, man.
Sick.
That's what I'm saying. It 100% could fucking work. Like, I do not see a world where this wouldn't be a possibility. Like, it's easily something they can do. And it's the most logical thing for next year, because I'm gonna be real. Like, Black and White, it's not their time yet, okay? Like, I know people want them already, but can we just take a minute and realize that it hasn't even been properly 2 years yet since BDSP came out, okay? It's way too early for Black and White remakes. It's way too early.
Way too. We're like 3, 4, 5 years out.
We need to cycle through a whole nother generation before we can even consider that. Okay, we need to cycle through freaking like and generation 10.
Like, bro, it makes so much. So something has to get inserted there. And what do they do when they want to take something and insert it there? They have to operate based on past games, because they're not going to introduce a new generation. Right? That would be crazy. It makes no sense.
No, because that's the thing.
Soon.
That's the thing. Like, it makes sense.
Have to operate based on something in the past.
It makes total sense.
What is the thing that has received the least amount of
attention? Yep.
For the longest amount of time, it's Johto.
Exactly.
Because we got Let's Go for Kanto.
And
we
then
got Oras for
think about. Oh, but dude, literally think about it. It's a perfect alignment, right? Like what you just said.
And
it's like what is the thing that's received the least amount of attention for the longest amount of time? Like what's the thing that we last gave attention to? Well, what was the last like Johto related game? Heart Gold Soul Silver. What was that? Like 2009, right?
Yep.
That was the last time we got to see Johto in any form.
And it's the 25th anniversary next year.
It's the 25th anniversary of the original games. And then, but think about it. What's the next thing logically after that? What's the game that came out that hasn't been viewed or seen in the longest amount of time since, after Gold and Silver? Well, then it's Black and White.
UNOVA,
Exactly. Then it's UNOVA and it's Black and White. Think about it. What happens after UNOVA? What's the most logical next thing after that? Well, it's going to be, again, Ruby Sapphire. Now, actually, no. Well, technically, no, it is. Yeah, I guess it did. It is. Yeah, because technically, unless you count X and Y. I guess X and Y will be the next logical step from there. But I think ORAS would make more sense, or like I guess Ruby Sapphire, because at that point it would have been longer time between Ruby Sapphire than, you know, all the other stuff. But basically, the point I'm trying to say here, the thing I'm trying to get across here for you guys, is that there is no reason for UNOVA next year. Like, there's no feasible, logical reason for UNOVA next year. It doesn't fit in. It doesn't make any sense. And if it does happen, I'll be happy. Okay, I do not mind, dude. More Pokemon for me, it just makes me happy. Okay, but it would be really strange. It'd be really weird. Really, 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 really weird if we get UNOVA next year. It just wouldn't fit with their usual strategies, schedules, and everything. Because as much as Legends Arceus was weird, it still fit in with the rest of the schedule, right? It didn't impact BDSP. BDSP still existed. Like, the remakes of Diamond and Pearl still happened, though they are overshadowed by Legends Arceus. They still existed as per the schedule, because they released exactly where they were supposed to release right after. They released in the remake era, or remake generation, which is Generation 8. That's a remake generation. Generation 9 is not a remake generation. Generation 10 is going to be a remake generation. But they released perfectly where they were supposed to release. The exact year, the exact timing, everything. And then Legends Arceus kind of existed in the middle of all that. And that's the thing. Like, you gotta think about this all in the same sense. This generation, it's an odd year. It's an odd generation, right? It's not even. It's usually even generations have remakes, odd generations don't, right? This is an odd generation, Generation 9. So we're not going to get a remake of the mainline remakes. And that's kind of what I think we should call them, the mainline remakes versus like the side remakes almost. Because Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee is a side remake. Whatever this Gold and Silver remake is going to be, if it ends up happening, is going to be, you know, a side remake. It's not going to be one of the main ones. That's just something you have to keep in mind. But yeah, so I think what we're expecting for next year is Gold and Silver. I think that's the most logical next thing. It's the 25th anniversary next year. They've had the longest time without a new game. It just makes sense. Unless they decided that, oh, Heart Gold, Soul Silver were so good that we should never remake Gold and Silver again. Let's just do UNOVA.
Yeah, that's what I think. You know what? That's what I think the different like timing of it, like the futuristic, that kind of solves that. You know, because it's not, they don't have to be like, oh, this is the Gold and Silver remake, right? It's like what they did. Remember what they did with Let's Go? Remember the marketing for it? It was really
like,
weird.
oh, it's more
They
like
oh, it's not a remake. It's not a remake. It's not a remake.
No, it's like
they used some word. I forget what it was. The marketing.
I don't remember exactly. You're right. They didn't really market it as a remake. They marketed it as this kind of a separate own thing, basically.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like we refer to it as we refer to it as remakes, but like realistically, they are kind of their own little things. You know what I mean? Because a faithful remake would just be the same game, just kind of, you know, exact same game, would just up the graphics a bit, I guess. Remaking it for a new console, but they weren't really 100% remakes. Reimagining, there you go.
That's correct.
So yeah, we're going to be getting a reimagining of Gold and Silver, more or less, next year. The year after that, by the way, 2025, Generation 10, okay? There's not much else to talk about there. There's not really much else to say. It just makes sense.
UNOVA around 2027, I'd say, probably.
Exactly. So because Pokemon generations run for 3 years, it's the perfect timing then for the next generation. It's just going to happen. It's just how it's always been. Because, by then, by 2025, it will have been 3 years since Scarlet and Violet. You know, it's already been, it's almost a year now, right? Since Scarlet and Violet came out. It's almost been a full year. You know, we're getting close now since the release of those. And, you know, this year is going to, once this year runs its course, we're going to be done with the DLC. So that's the DLC year done. So by the time next year runs through, that's going to be 2 full years. And then we're going to go through all of 2025. And then at the end of 2025, that's going to be the 3rd year of Scarlet and Violet, and then also the release of the next generation. It's just how this stuff works and how it is. So I think that's pretty much what we have to say in regards to the future. I mean, do you have anything else to add on top of that, Sylph?
No, I think surprisingly enough, we covered the entire itinerary we had. Damn,
that was actually crazy, dude. Well, we got it sorted then, didn't we?
That was a lot of fun. Holy cow.